Part 70. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 695. This latest Allied force is wearing heavy armor, holding a machine gun, and carrying a rocket launcher on its back, giving it a heavy and heavily armed look. It seems that precisely because the equipment is too heavy, the movement speed of this type of troops is really slow. When running on foot, the speed is much slower than that of normal infantry. After 15 new soldiers jumped off the plane, under Agent Tanya's order, they came to Agent Tanya at a slow speed and gave a military salute, "Sir." Agent Tanya valued their air defense capabilities and did not care about their movement speed. Looking at them now, she nodded with satisfaction, turned to Wang Ling and said proudly, "Look, this is what I told you yesterday." "Yes, our Allied forces' new air defense unit." "Well, heavily armed soldiers, not bad." Wang Ling nodded casually and said perfunctorily. But his perfunctory words made the 15 infantrymen's hearts skip a beat, and even Agent Tanya's eyes widened. "This is the latest unit developed by our allies." "How do you know the name of their unit?" Wang Ling spread his hands and looked innocent. "You're blind, don't worry about it." "Damned. I believe you." Agent Tanya gritted her teeth, as if she was going to catch Wang Ling and torture him. "Is Wang Ling really blind? That's weird." This heavily armored soldier is also a new type of unit in the Allied army in this version of the game, and it is also an iconic unit. Wang Ling was very impressed by it. Heavy armored soldiers, like Allied soldiers, have two combat forms. When fighting while standing, holding a machine gun and shooting, in this form, the firepower is actually no different from that of ordinary Allied soldiers. It is even not as practical as Allied soldiers due to the speed of march. However, once deployed, this heavily armored soldier becomes terrifying. After deployment, the heavily armed soldiers will directly switch weapons, use anti-tank rocket launchers, and launch missiles to attack. This attack method can be used against the ground and air defense, and has a longer range than ordinary infantry. It has extraordinary destructive power against armored units, such as various tanks, vehicles, aircraft, flying saucers, and airships. It can be called the infantry version of the tank killer. Especially after being promoted to the 3-star elite level, the threat to tanks and aircraft has skyrocketed. It has a longer range, a faster rate of fire, and can launch super destructive missiles almost continuously. All tanks, aircraft, and other armored arms, once it is targeted, it will be quite a headache. If an apocalypse tank approaches and attacks outside the range of the elite heavy armed soldiers, then this apocalypse tank will probably not be an opponent of the elite heavy armed soldiers. As for several Kirov airships, guarded by more than a dozen heavily armed soldiers, it would be difficult for them to forcefully break into the Allied base and they would have to bypass them. The laser UFO moves very fast, but if it catches up with the bombardment of heavily armored soldiers, it will be a bit of a headache. If it is not dealt with in advance, I am afraid that the laser UFO will be killed. From this perspective, the emergence of heavily armed soldiers has indeed made up for the shortcomings of the Allied defense and control efficiency to a certain extent. Of course, as I said before, no matter in the game or in the world of Red Alert, there is no perfect unit, and the heavily armored soldier is no exception. The flaws are even more prominent than the advantages. Let's not talk about the issue of movement speed. It's as slow as a snail. If you expect them to attack, the daylily will be cold. Although the anti-tank rocket launchers of this heavily armored soldier are powerful against armored units after deployment, they are relatively weak against infantry and buildings. It is like a Navy SEAL team that can instantly kill infantry but cannot attack them. Same as tanks and vehicles. This restriction is quite embarrassing and dangerous for heavily armed soldiers. Almost an ordinary mobilized soldier can single-handedly challenge several deployed heavily armed soldiers, and the chance of winning is huge. If it were Wang Ling, or agents such as Tanya and Navy SEALs who could instantly kill infantry, the threat to them from heavy soldiers would be almost zero. Recalling this information in his mind, Wang Ling smiled a little playfully. He turned around and waved his hand back as he walked to remind, I also guess that this heavy armed soldier will do great damage to armored units, but it is almost impossible to defeat infantry. There is nothing you can do, so when setting up defenses, you have to specially arrange guards to protect them. Hey you! Agent Tanya felt a little nervous after hearing this, and wanted to ask more questions, but Wang Ling had already walked away at this time. Agent Tanya had no choice but to turn around, look at the heavily armed soldiers, frown, and ask, is what he said true? Several heavily armored soldiers glanced at each other, and one of the representatives replied with lingering fear, Sir, you are right. Who is he? We have just been assigned to various theaters after the training of our type of troops. He has never fought before, but how does he know so clearly? This person is so scary. Yes, he is simply a freak. Agent Tanya gritted her teeth, feeling very dissatisfied that Wang Ling knew so much about her allies. However, fortunately among misfortunes, the coalition forces and the allied forces are currently in a joint state. Wang Ling is a friend rather than an enemy to them, which invisibly relieves a lot of pressure on them. But if they are hostile, and Wang Ling knows so many of their military secrets, then the allies will really be in trouble and have trouble sleeping and eating. As for the mentality of the allies, Wang Ling didn't bother to care at all. In other words, he had long been used to it, and he didn't take it to heart after leaving. It didn't matter at all whether he should rest or not. As for Agent Tanya, after being annoyed for a while, she simply looked away, stared in Wang Ling's direction and slashed her eyes a few times, and then directly arranged for heavily armed soldiers to be dispersed into 3 teams and deployed. At the same time, they also followed Wang Ling's suggestion. Each team is guarded by more than 10 allied soldiers and a SEAL. Subsequently, the development of the base continues. Yesterday, after the uninterrupted work of the engineering troops, a large number of buildings in the base have been rebuilt, and a number of additional defensive buildings have been added. After strengthening the defense power in the base, the spy satellite was finally rebuilt. To be honest, it was quite awkward to be used to the broad perspective brought by spy satellites and suddenly return to the original limited view map. Looking at the unexplored dark areas in the electronic map, Wang Ling was a little displeased. When he saw the spy satellite beginning to be rebuilt, he felt a rare sense of anticipation. After nearly half a day of continuous construction, the spy satellite was finally rebuilt. Swish swish swish. And when the spy satellite was powered on and put into use, the unexplored areas on the electronic map that had troubled the Allied bases for a long time were all explored in an instant, and the entire Eastern Plains theater was visible at a glance. Wang Ling immediately started to check, and when he saw the forces of Yuri's base on the map, they were as powerful as him, and he couldn't help but frowned. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 696. This Eastern Plains war zone, as its name suggests, has a very simple terrain. The entire map is an empty suburban plain. On this plain, there are 3 small rivers flowing, meandering, and crisscrossing. There is also a forest that stands in the center of the map. There are even several houses and a large area of farmland. However, due to the war, this farmland has long been abandoned, and the owner of the house does not know whether he is dead or alive. Apart from this, there are no other landmarks on the entire map. And on this vast plain, there are actually 6 Yuri bases standing, evenly distributed in all directions on the map. This was before Wang Ling suddenly took action and killed one, interrupting the rhythm of the Seoul Empire. Otherwise, Yuri base would have been allowed to gather troops from this war zone, and there would be no one knows how many there would be. Good guy, 6 bases. The Empire of Mind really thinks highly of us, and even deployed 6 bases here. Damn it, 1 to 6. I'm just wondering how you can keep attacking for so long. Of course, not only Wang Ling, but other officers and soldiers with authority also checked the electronic map immediately after exploring the electronic map in all directions. They saw 6 towering Yuri bases at a glance, and their expressions changed. No wonder Yuri's troops were able to attack continuously the day before yesterday. They were supported by 6 bases. 1 to 6, it was still a semi-disabled Allied base. No matter what troops were stationed there, it would be extremely difficult. Relying on the firepower of Wang Ling and armed helicopters, the Allied base successfully blocked all the enemy forces. But how many are there? Facing the will battle with Yuri's troops, no wonder he was as tired as before. The members of the Allied field team who arrived later had expressions of surprise on their faces. They were not surprised by the number of Yuri bases, but they were surprised that the previous guards were able to hold on under the continuous large-scale impact of this number. Unlike them, the original guards of this base, after a period of shock, all cast grateful glances at Wang Ling. Ask yourself, during the defensive battles in the past few days, if they were the only ones, I am afraid they would not be able to withstand such a crazy attack by the enemy, and they would be destroyed from the beginning. It can be said that Wang Ling has almost played a crucial role in the survival of this base today, just like the Sacred Needle. Even a charming and willful agent like Tanya has to admit this. However, Wang Ling has long been accustomed to this feeling of being the pillar of support. Now he has become accustomed to it and does not take this credit to heart. While others have different emotions, he is carefully observing these 6 bases. When he was in the Holy City war zone before, it was not that Wang Ling had not observed the Eastern Plains war zone and knew that there were originally only 3 Allied bases here, and the remaining 3 must have just arrived in the past few days. As for which 3 bases they are, it is actually easy to identify, because 3 of the 6 Yuri bases are covered with various defensive buildings, and they have obviously been developed for a long time. The remaining 3 bases are much inferior in comparison. All kinds of buildings are still in the reconstruction stage. More or less, even the defensive buildings are very sparse. Even because of the crazy battle not long ago, even the number of guards remaining inside the base is now slightly insufficient. Of course, Agent Tanya could also guess what he could discover. While he was observing the enemy's situation, in the electronic map, the original 6 Yuri bases with the same color were marked with serial numbers, from 1 to 6, from strong to weak. This is mostly done by Agent Tanya in order to facilitate the distinction. After all, she is still a female commander, and her thoughts are always more delicate than those of a grown man. However, this is somewhat irrelevant to Wang Ling. After all, in his eyes, no matter which Yuri base is located, the end will be the same. He continued to stare at the electronic map for a long time, and also thought about it for a while. After coming up with an idea, Wang Ling smiled sadly, flicked away the pebbles in his hand, and went straight to Agent Tanya's command post. Everyone along the way, none of the Allied guards dared to stop him, and they let him in smoothly. "Hey, why are you so rude? You just barged in without even saying hello," Agent Tanya complained about this. But Wang Ling was too lazy to explain anything, and directly explained his purpose. "No more nonsense, Tanya, our coalition base has not arrived yet, and there is some shortage of manpower. Lend me 5 Phantom tanks." "What? Asking me to borrow a tank?" Agent Tanya was surprised for a moment, looked at Wang Ling and asked, "What do you want to do?" Wang Ling raised his chin and pointed the direction of the electronic map. "What do you think? If it's just defense, do I have to borrow troops from you specifically? My God, you are such a straightforward person. The electronic map has just been unfolded, and you are about to launch an attack." Agent Tanya was a little helpless. Her idea was to quickly develop the base while Wang Ling's powerful fighting force was still there, so that she could better compete with Yuri's troops. From the beginning, it was a war of attrition. Confrontation. But I didn't expect that Wang Ling would want to attack the base before it was even developed. However, she was not in a hurry to refuse, and asked playfully, "I can't lend it to you, but what do you want in return?" "Repay." Wang Ling was stunned, and then smiled. "Why return? 5 phantom tanks in exchange for at least 1 Yuri base. Isn't this deal a good deal? I will try my best to bring the phantom tanks back to you alive. That's it? It's really straightforward. I'll borrow it, but don't be too eager for quick success. Even if Yuri's base has just been developed, it's not that easy to break. That won't bother you." After receiving the phantom tank, Wang Ling was too lazy to stay at the Allied command post. He waved, turned around and walked out. He summoned all the members of the Wolf team and Eagle team of the Allied forces. Not long after, he asked Agent Tanya if 5 borrowed phantom tanks also arrived at the assembly point. According to convention, before a war, the first to mobilize is always the first, and Wang Ling is no exception. However, his mobilization was very simple, with only a few words: "Brothers, we suffered enough when facing the attack of Yuri's troops before, and many brothers even died for it. But now, when it comes to revenge, here we are. Take advantage of the fact that those bases haven't developed yet, kill them early, and give them a good humming beating. Fight! Fight! Fight!" But the coalition troops just did this. After a few simple words, they became full of fighting spirit, and everyone shouted loudly. After a few roars, everyone quickly boarded the anti-aircraft tracked vehicle. Under Wang Ling's order, they rushed directly to the closest Yuri base No. 5. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 697. Hey! Hey! Look, the coalition forces actually took the initiative to attack. Oh my god, they really dare to fight. As soon as the electronic map was expanded, they were so anxious to fight back. They are so fierce. What do you know? This is called daring to fight and dare to do something. Before you came, our defensive strength was a little stretched, but the coalition forces counterattacked once and destroyed a Yuri base. Yes, when I saw the coalition charging, my mentality was the same as yours, but when I saw them really killing Yuri's base, I was completely stupid. They were not tigers, but they were too decisive and took the lead. Team leader Wang Ling, his firepower is simply outrageous. Oh my god, is it so fierce? Is that team leader Wang Ling stronger than Chief Tanya? TCH, what nonsense are you talking about? How can he be stronger than Commander Tanya? Commander Tanya didn't come before, which highlighted him. Look, has he participated in the battle since we came? Okay, stop arguing. We are friendly forces now. The coalition forces have successfully defeated the enemy. We are harmless. Just watch the battle with peace of mind. As soon as the electronic map was expanded, Wang Ling led his team to attack. This approach seemed a bit reckless to outsiders. Moreover, it was difficult to avoid attracting attention for this large-scale mobilization of troops. The moment they set off, a group of Allied guards started talking in a variety of ways, some optimistic and some sarcastic. However, Wang Ling didn't care at all about these comments. Combined with the transition to the real world, he had been resting for several days and his energy had returned to its peak state. Moreover, as the electronic map expands, the 3 new Yuri bases have not yet been rebuilt, and the number of guards in the bases is slightly insufficient. If we don't attack at this time, do we have to wait for them to develop and return to their peak combat power before attacking? In this battle, all the reinforcements of the coalition forces were dispatched, one by one, including all the armed helicopters and Rhino tanks. It was a mighty force. Such a large-scale charge was not only observed by the Allies, but also by the Yuri base. The 3 Yuri bases immediately felt panicked and quickly concentrated the guards in the base towards the edge, trying to concentrate their strength to resist the impact of the coalition forces. Wang Ling's target, the number 5 Yuri base, is now more like an ant on a hot pot, spinning around. Not only the guards are busy, but even the engineers are anxious, speeding up and trying to build more on the edge. A mind control tower. However, the construction of this base must be done step by step. What's the use of rushing? After just building a mind control tower, the vanguard of the coalition's armed helicopters had already arrived nearby. Under Wang Ling's order, they were divided into 2 rows and deployed front and back. Then, an army of anti-aircraft tracked vehicles arrived and put down a group of infantry including Wang Ling. Then, 5 Phantom tanks also arrived at the battle line, and finally the Rhino tank unit. After all the troops were assembled, Wang Ling deployed them according to the safest tactics, fighting steadily and advancing step by step. The armed helicopters in the back row took off, crossed the front row, and reached the edge of the fire circle of the outer gate cannon. They immediately deployed, stretched out the long barrel, and fired several explosive shells in succession, directly killing the gate cannon. And even a few blasted into the guard group, killing nearly 10 Yuri recruits, destroying 2 Get tanks, and the aftermath even affected 3 Gust tanks. In the fierce battles in the past few days, the armed helicopter group naturally suffered a certain degree of losses. About 1/3 of the armed helicopters were bombed in various ways. However, the remaining armed helicopters have all been promoted to the elite level. The soaring destructive power is actually much more powerful than the previous comprehensive firepower. It is Wang Ling's strongest support at present. For example, right now, the front row armed helicopters fired several rounds of artillery fire, destroying the buildings and defenders outside Yuri's base. According to the past style of Yuri base, if they are beaten to the doorstep and the troops are bombarded, they will definitely gather together for a counterattack. For this reason, Wang Ling was already ready for battle. But unexpectedly, the guards at this base were a little timid. After being bombarded by the armed helicopters, they had no intention of fighting back. Instead, they turned around and retreated into the base, obviously wanting to avoid the battle. However, the battle has already begun. Is it possible to still avoid the battle? The front row armed helicopters were still bombarding them, blowing up several defensive buildings on the periphery of Yuri's base one after another. They stopped only after there were no more targets within the range. The armed helicopters in the back immediately flew up, crossed the front, landed in place of the front row, and continued the bombardment. Moreover, there happened to be guards within the bombardment range, so they bombarded them. But these guards were so cowardly that they retreated deeper into the base again, refusing to charge head-on. It's kind of interesting to be so cowardly, Wang Ling chuckled, picking his chin, looking cunning. However, your base is so big, as guards, where else can you retreat to? Armed helicopters continue. Under his order, the rear armed helicopters continued to move forward, replacing the front row. After landing, they fired at all enemy buildings within the range. After a bombardment, they were all dismantled. Then, there was another round of replacements, and a new round of armed helicopters bombarded the evading guards for the 3rd time, causing 6 deaths, 4 serious injuries, and 1 tank bursting, leaving 2 with half health. After repeated harassment, this group of Yuri guards finally got angry. More than 130 infantrymen of various types and more than 30 tanks and vehicles of various types charged forward and were forced to the ground. This step is called a fierce counterattack. However, Wang Ling and the others had encountered this kind of formation more than once during their previous continuous battles, and even the more ferocious momentum had been forcibly resisted by them. Now, they did not pay attention to this kind of battle formation at all. Be prepared for all-out battle. However, when Wang Ling picked up the enhanced version of the AK rifle and was about to shoot, he was suddenly stunned, rolled his eyes, and had an idea in his mind. He immediately contacted Uncle Hay and returned to the transfer station of the different dimensional system. Uncle Hay was also a little confused. "What's wrong with you, so abnormal? It's rare for you to come back in broad daylight, and it's before a war. Do you want to rest, or do you want to escape from the battle?" Wang Ling couldn't laugh or cry for a moment. "Please, Uncle Hay, with these troops, do I need to escape? I've had enough rest, and I won't miss this moment." "Then you are. Change of arms, seals. Different dimension red alert world." Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 698. Are you here specifically to switch arms? But your elite combat soldiers have not yet reached the level of 10-star Soldier King. Are you in a hurry to switch arms? Uncle Hay was quite surprised by Wang Ling's answer. Wang Ling nodded and replied, "That's right. Uncle Hay, don't be stunned. Let's get started. There are also military experience books, so come with us." "Good." Uncle Hay had no reason to refuse. With a snap of his fingers, the switch of arms started immediately. In an instant, there was a buzz in Wang Ling's mind, and a training memory about the Navy SEALs was poured into him. Wang Ling's elite combat soldiers have not reached the level of King of Soldiers, but after previous continuous high-intensity battles, this unit has accumulated a considerable amount of experience and is not in urgent need. Moreover, the elite combat soldiers have strong combat firepower and are the main force against Yuri's troops. They will also be Wang Ling's main force in the future. There will be no surprises in being promoted to the 10-star Soldier King. However, after reaching the level of Soldier King, any extra experience in the arms will be wasted. After reaching max level, currently only one SEAL can be converted. Although the SEAL team can kill infantry in an instant, it has limitations. For example, the range is short, it does almost no damage to tanks, and it also needs to attack buildings in close proximity. It can be said that the SEAL team needs to be upgraded to a higher level than the elite. Combat soldiers are much more difficult, so Wang Ling wants to switch some time in advance, plan carefully, and give the experience of killing infantry to the SEALs. Wang Ling had already done the conversion of arms many times, and it could be said that he was familiar with it. With such memory installation, he completed the conversion in a short time. Then he was instilled with experience books of the arms, and after a period of time, he was successfully promoted to a 1-star veteran. After finishing these tasks, Wang Ling smiled, said hello to Uncle Hay, turned around and returned to the red alert world. Although this conversion process takes some time, this red alert world was created for him after all. During the time when Wang Ling left, the time in the red alert world was always at a standstill. It would wait until he returned. Start flowing. 1 second, Wang Ling was still holding an enhanced version of the AK rifle and staring at him. The next second, he suddenly became a 1-star veteran SEAL. Holding an MP5 submachine gun in his hand, he stared at the guards at Yuri base who were counter-attacking in front of him. After getting used to it for a while, Wang Ling hurriedly changed the order. "Attention, armed helicopters, the infantry will only fight virus snipers, ignore the others and concentrate on bombarding other armored units. All SEALs who have been upgraded to the elite level will cease fire, and everyone else will continue as usual." Boom, boom, boom. Boom boom boom. This group of armed helicopters was still sweeping the approaching Yuri infantry. However, after receiving Wang Ling's order, they suddenly changed their targets and started bombarding the Getter tanks and Tornado tanks in the enemy team, leaving the Yuri soldiers alone. The infantry approached. Without the gunships to target them, the group of Yuri infantrymen directly lost a major fatal threat. They took this opportunity to charge quickly, and soon they broke into Wang Ling's range. Chug tug tug. Tug tug tug. However, what was waiting for them was the rapid fire from Wang Ling and several other SEALs. The entire Yuri infantry team fell down in rows like wheat in an instant. During this period, Sun Dehe and Erlu were also launching long-distance and wide-area electromagnetic attacks non-stop, trying to steal some heads. However, how could they defeat the SEALs against the infantry? Under the harvest of this combination, Yuri's infantry team was like a boy delivering a treasure. There was no room for counterattack, and it was quickly harvested on a large scale. Regardless of the type of soldier, it was relatively easy to level up in the early stages. Under such rapid fire and with the fall of a large number of Yuri infantry, Wang Ling was successfully promoted to the 3-star elite level. It can be said that this type of military unit is currently the fastest to reach the elite level after his conversion. Now there are still more than 30 Yuri infantrymen who are sprinting hard, to death, but Wang Ling did not compete for these experiences. Instead, he transformed into an ace-level elite combat soldier, shooting Yuri from a distance. Army tanks and vehicles. The number of this group of armored troops was not too large, and there were infantry teams blocking the road ahead, hindering their progress, and armed helicopters were concentrating fire and bombardment. They were unlucky during this period, and nearly half of the tanks and vehicles were bombed. The remaining ones were barely close to these armed helicopters, but Wang Ling opened fire again. Under the suppression of the powerful firepower, the number of tanks and vehicles decreased at an exaggerated speed. After reluctantly rushing forward, the Phantom tanks and Rhino tanks also opened fire. Under this heavy blow, the entire Yuri armored force could not hold on for long, and was completely annihilated along with the remaining infantry. Why had they avoided fighting before? Cowardly. It really is. But I can't blame him for this. After all, the troops from the 6 major bases had failed to capture the Allied base in the past, but now the base's main combat power has focused their fire on the door. With the strength of his family, how can they stop it? However, this is war, there is no way out. Knowing that he cannot win, he wants to avoid the war, but Wang Ling presses forward step by step. He has no choice but to fight, but in the end he will die in vain. With the death of this group of Yuri base guards, the defense strength of the entire Yuri base suddenly dropped to a low point. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Wang Ling directly launched a forceful attack. The defensive buildings of Yuri base still pose a considerable threat, but Wang Ling has long been familiar with dealing with these buildings. On the one hand, he uses armed helicopters for long-range bombardment, and on the other hand, he himself transforms into a magnetic explosive infantry for long-range bombardment, specializing in long-range bombardment. Pick up the getter cannon and shoot it. As for the mind control tower, Wang Ling transformed into a Navy SEAL. Relying on the fact that he was not affected by mind control, he could blow it up in the face to gain as much experience as possible. After taking out these defensive buildings, the coalition troops immediately went crazy. They scattered and scrambled to dismantle various main buildings. Even Wang Ling joined this team and blew up the tank factory and command post one after another, exposing all the soldiers and even engineers who came out were wiped out by him. After all, this base has not been developed for a long time, and the number of various buildings is not very large. Under their fierce bombardment, it was quickly dismantled, and another Yuri base was destroyed on the battlefield of the Eastern Plains. Is it that simple? It seems that I really underestimated him. He actually killed a Yuri base so easily. Ahem, it's not surprising. Didn't you see how powerful the coalition leader Wang Ling was when Yuri's troops attacked? He led his team to attack a simple Yuri base. Isn't that easy? Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 699. The entire process of the coalition's attack was also witnessed by the guards at the coalition base. Now that they saw the victory of the battle, the new guards showed their faces in shock, but those guards who had seen Wang Ling's strength were in a state of confusion. The feel of the material. Indeed, when we were in the Holy City war zone before, whether it was the Yuri base on the mountainside or on the top of the mountain, it was much stronger than this base now. Those had already been killed by Wang Ling's team. How could this base have anything? Difficulty. During the game, both enemy and friendly forces are divided into 3 levels: simple, medium and cold. The level division in the red alert world is not so obvious. But if you have to indicate the level, the number 5 Yuri base just now can only reach the simple level. Not to mention Wang Ling, who remained unmoved after the enemy base of this difficulty was eliminated. Even Sun Dehua, Erlu, Chen Tong and others did not have any unnecessary emotions. After all, this ending was completely expected. Of course, Wang Ling's goal was not just a simple Yuri base number 5 when he mobilized troops. When many allied guards were amazed, he directly marched northward, pointing his sword at the nearest Yuri base number 4. He wanted to eliminate them easily. Such behavior fell into the eyes of the allied guards, but now there was no prejudice or doubt, and there was even a little more expectation. However, this expectation turned into panic in the eyes of Yuri base. Just as Wang Ling was leading his army to attack, Yuri base number 1 suddenly dispatched more than 10 laser UFOs and more than 100 infantrymen. More than 20 tanks and vehicles were divided into several echelons in an emergency, trying to intercept them by force. Similarly, Yuri base number 2 also sent 10 laser UFOs, and Yuri base number 6 sent more than 20 armored units to go together in an attempt to forcibly intercept them. As for Yuri base number 3, because it was located far away and water from far away could not quench the thirst nearby, no troops were sent there. Stop. But after Wang Ling observed the enemy's movements on the electronic map, he really stopped. However, there was no intention to retreat. Instead, the troops were gathered together, selected a location and deployed, as if they were going to have a head-on fight with these Yuri reinforcements. Reinforcements come, so what? As long as the total force and firepower cannot suppress Wang Ling and his troops, there is no way to stop them. Even if these reinforcements were added together, Wang Ling would not have any fear. What's more, these troops came in batches in a desperate situation. If they were divided and annihilated, there would be less pressure. After the deployment was completed, the first batch of laser UFOs arrived quickly and broke into the firepower range of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles. After Wang Ling gave the order, everyone opened fire. Even Wang Ling transformed into a Soldier King level. Air defense troops, additional fire. Dong 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 dong. Boom, boom, boom. Swish swish swish. During this period, the laser UFOs were naturally firing laser beams to counterattack, but overall, they were suppressed by all-round firepower. More than 10 laser UFOs were quickly shot down, and in the end, they only killed 2 anti-aircraft crawler vehicles. Only 2 vehicles were seriously injured. Not long after, 2 groups of armored troops arrived one after another. As a result, the long-range bombardment of the armed helicopters, coupled with Wang Ling's long-range strafing, quickly depleted their numbers. After getting closer, the Phantom tanks, Rhino tanks, and even other mobilization troops, Sun Dehua and Erlu, all opened fire at once. These more than 40 armored units were quickly eaten by the coalition forces. Subsequently, the laser UFO from Yuri base number 2 also arrived at the battle line, and was also shot down by the army of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles and Wang Ling. As for the infantry team that arrived last, it was even simpler. The virus snipers were directly killed by armed helicopters, and then Wang Ling teamed up with other SEALs who had not been promoted to the elite level to kill them all. Several waves of reinforcements have been wiped out so far. Far from shaking the foundation of the coalition's offensive team, they only temporarily blocked it for a moment. After destroying these Yuri reinforcements, Wang Ling was not polite and ordered the troops to continue advancing. Today's battle must still be fought. However, unlike before being blocked, This time Wang Ling temporarily changed the target of the attack and rushed towards base number 6 with his troops. Previously, because of its location, base number 6 was relatively far away from Wang Ling and the others, so Wang Ling had no idea about it. But at this moment, base number 6 is also one of the new bases. The buildings in all aspects are not very complete, and because of the previous crazy attack, the number of troops in the base has not been greatly supplemented. More than 20 tanks were dispatched to block the coalition forces. Now that all these tanks have been wiped out, the number of guards in base number 6 is even more stretched. Is it natural to not attack you at this time? He temporarily abandoned base 4 and rushed to Yuri base 6. At this moment, Yuri base 6 was so anxious that he hurriedly requested support from several other Yuri bases, but no one responded. After all, after successive battles, the number of guards in either base is not too many. Moreover, within this spiritual empire, the major commanders are not monolithic, and other commanders really cannot bear huge risks to support them. Under such circumstances, the troops led by Wang Ling finally reached the city after a series of treks. After the assembly was completed, following Wang Ling's order, the armed helicopters continued to maintain their usual camp and offensive posture and launched a strong attack. The defensive strength of base number 6 was not even as good as the destroyed base number 5. It was basically not difficult to attack by force. With the fierce attack of the coalition offensive troops, they were quickly restrained and swept across. The Eastern Plains war zone was destroyed again. A Yuri base. 2 bases were killed in one day, which seemed a bit unacceptable to the Empire of the Soul. The other 4 bases were obviously in a panic. The guard troops were dispatched back and forth, but they could never find a suitable place to garrison them. As for the number 4 Yuri base, they had almost been targeted by Wang Ling before. If the internal emptiness of the number 6 base had not caused Wang Ling to change the target midway, they would have been destroyed. And even if they escaped now, they were not safe, because Wang Ling could change direction at any time and continue attacking base 4. Judging from the strong combat effectiveness displayed by this unit, the commander of base 4 had no confidence that it could withstand it. As a result, after some thought, the base commander made a decision that shocked Wang Ling. They took the initiative to dismantle all the buildings except the command post, took the funds and guards, and drove the base vehicles. The army rushed to Yuri base No. 3. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 700. Although it was said that it was the battlefield of the Eastern Plains that we arrived later, and after successive fierce battles, the number of guards inside the base was slightly insufficient, but it was still a large base. Base number 4 took the base vehicles with all the personnel to move. This scene fell on electronic video. It is quite spectacular. Wang Ling had seen such a scene in the Red Alert world, when the entire base was moving to the battlefield, and it was unbelievable that he would see it again today. However, this time the transfer target was changed to Yuri base, and he was still forced to make this decision. Tisk tisk. I haven't led the troops to attack yet, so I just ran away and joined forces with the number 3 base? Should I say you are a coward, or are you too smart? After watching for a while, Wang Ling clicked his tongue. Became sarcastic. In fact, the transfer of base number 4 this time, whether it was a coward or a shrewd one, although it left them in an awkward position, it did ensure the safety of the entire base. The initial goal of Wang Ling's attack this time was to eliminate Yuri base number 456 and clear the place. As for bases 1, 2, and 3, it is not the time to attack yet. However, the plan really couldn't keep up with the changes. Only then did the 2 bases number 56 and number 4 base be killed. Base number 4 immediately fled and sought shelter from base number 3, which made Wang Ling feel dumbfounded for a while. Team leader, are we so scary? Look at this base, we ran away with our tail between our legs. While Wang Ling was watching, Erlu started complaining. However, even though he was complaining, in fact this guy was very happy. Wang Ling smiled and glared at him. What do you think? We have destroyed 2 bases in a row. How many troops can be more terrifying than ours? It must be lucky that it runs fast, otherwise it will be the next base. After hearing this, Sun Dehu suddenly asked, Team leader, if we want to destroy it, can we still let it escape? It seeks shelter from the number 3 base, so can we just destroy the number 3 base along with it? Wang Ling was speechless for a moment, but Chen Tong looked at him with contempt. You are really inflated now. Although your current unit is very powerful, but in a real head-to-head confrontation with Yuri's troops, you are no match at all. The main contribution is still gunships and Wang Ling. Hey, I didn't offend you, did I? Why didn't you pick up the pot? Chen Tong had a higher position than him, and Sun Dehu didn't dare to be too presumptuous. This aggrieved look really amused many people. At this time, Wang Lingke interrupted and said, our current combat effectiveness is not weak, but it is not strong enough to overwhelm the entire war zone. What's more, General Li Wiki and the others haven't come yet, and neither the Wolf Group nor the Eagle Group's large forces have arrived, and we don't have enough manpower to fight. Since Base 4 has such a strong desire to survive, let's let him go this time. Let's retreat and go back to rest. Yes. Under Wang Ling's order, all the mobilized troops quickly boarded the vehicles, and the entire offensive force retreated back to the Allied base in an orderly manner. After they returned, the Allied guards were extremely excited. Even the members of the subsequent field team looked at them with a greatly improved attitude. What a pleasure! Haha, well done, guys from the coalition forces. Forcing Yuri's base to move its position, it's amazing. I beat Yuri's base so hard that I can't fight back. Various voices of admiration came and went, which greatly satisfied the vanity of Sun Dehu and others. Even Wang Ling couldn't help but laugh a few times. Although this is an Allied base, and their coalition troops are stationed here, it is somewhat eye-catching, but after this battle, it has dispelled the discriminatory mentality of all Allied troops. Even because of the previous continuous defensive operations, Zhang Qiang and others, the group of people were still silently grateful to Wang Ling and the others. In today's Eastern Plains war zone, although there are still 4 Yuri bases, and the coalition army only has 1 Allied base, plus Wang Ling and others to guard it, in fact, the combat effectiveness has been roughly maintained at the same level. In a short period of time, there is no way to tell the winner. For this reason, after returning to the Allied base and stationed there, Wang Ling was no longer in a hurry to attack other Yuri bases, and simply rested here for a while. Of course, he was recuperating, but as a commander, Agent Tanya has been busy all the time. The general construction of the base has taken shape, and the only thing left is to check for leaks and fill in the gaps. While setting up defenses, Agent Tanya even dispatched a team of engineers to leave the base, maintain a certain distance from the base, and build additional crack generators. The function of this crack generator, to put it bluntly, is actually a super weapon that confuses the Empire of Mind, making it impossible for it to accurately determine what military units are distributed under the black area and how many of them are divided into them. After all, the influence of the super weapon is too great. If Wang Ling had not arrived in time, the entire Eastern Plains war zone would have been lost because of the super weapon, so special precautions had to be taken. Of course, it's not just this one. At least 3 crack generators must be built in different areas to amplify the confusion effect, which is safer. This was a normal operation discussed during the joint meeting, but Wang Ling couldn't help but frown after watching the first crack generator take shape. This time, he did not forcefully break into the Allied command post and contacted directly using the radio, Tanya. In the Eastern Plains Theater, are the original Allied and coalition bases building crack generators? Agent Tanya also answered this question despite her busy schedule. Of course, the super weapon of the Mind Empire is waiting for you, how can you not be careful? But why didn't you guard against it? Wang Ling asked immediately. Agent Tanya sighed and replied, I have wondered about this problem before, and I have watched the video. Here at the Allied base, because of the enemy attack, Yuri's large force came to attack and forcibly explored and opened the crack generator. The dark area expanded the perspective, so the psychic storm fell. What about the coalition base? When I watched the electronic video, the coalition base was full of wild orcs, but there was no trace of other Yuri troops. The coalition base, I'm ashamed to say, is because a spy broke into the base and secretly expanded the view. As a result, due to a genetic mutation, the spy also turned into a wild orc, so I didn't see other Yuri troops. Spies. There are no spies in the Soul Empire. This troop is exclusive to your allies, right? Yes, the Allied base has sent spies before, trying to infiltrate into the Yuri base. However, as soon as they reached the edge of the base, they were controlled by the mind control tower. Instead, they disguised themselves as mobilization soldiers of the Allied forces and relied on the electronic map. This individual was not obvious and sneaked into the coalition base. What? What happened? Didn't I say during the joint meeting that spies can't do anything to Yuri's base? They can't withstand mind control. Why do we have to send spies? Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 701. Hearing this reason, Wang Ling couldn't help but feel a little angry. Why build rift generators all over the battlefield? Isn't it just to confuse the Empire of Mind and make them unable to use super weapons accurately? This is good. The Allied forces were warned a long time ago, but unexpectedly, spies were sent out and controlled by Yuri base. Instead, they infiltrated into the Allied forces base and caused such a catastrophe. A spy destroyed an entire coalition base. How could Wang Ling not be angry? Hey, who are you angry at? Wang Ling was annoyed, but Agent Tanya was not to be outdone. I didn't send the spies out, why are you so angry at me? Do I look so easy to bully? After being reprimanded by her, Wang Ling calmed down and didn't say any other angry words for a while. Indeed, the Allied commander made a big mistake by sending a spy to Yuri base, allowing Yuri base to take the opportunity to destroy the entire coalition base. But this Allied commander who gave orders also died on the battlefield under the dual attacks of Yuri's troops and Psychic Storm. What's more, things have already happened, and there is no point in Wang Ling getting angry again. He simply sighed, told Agent Tanya and cut off the radio communication. Now that things have come to this, we can only take a warning. In the following time, the Allied base was still being mobilized, deployed, and constructed in all aspects, and Wang Ling always stayed aside and watched while resting. As for the Yuri base, it suffered several big losses in succession. Seeing the development of the Allied base, it did launch an attack on the way. However, after being annihilated by the team led by Tanya's agent, it calmed down and stepped up its troops stationing and construction, trying to fight against the enemy. The Allied base is engaged in a war of attrition. This situation, which lasted for 2 days, finally changed again, because the coalition base vehicles and large troops headed by General Li Wiki finally arrived on the battlefield of the Eastern Plains. Different from other bases, General Li Wiki's place is dispatched with 2 base vehicles, because one of them is Wang Ling's. Wang Ling, the hands-off boss, is very happy these days. Li Tonghe, who serves as his deputy, not to mention the 2 of them, Gu Suanwu, couldn't laugh or cry. The other troops that followed were a group of elite soldiers. After all, they came from victory. In the process of moving the battlefield, they were so majestic and high-spirited that they felt like elites walking around. The piles of anti-aircraft tracked vehicles and many elite-level apocalypse tanks, even if they were not involved in the battle, looked like they were flexing their muscles when they were driving, and the Allied guards were surprised to see them. Haha, here it comes. It's finally here, I've been waiting for a long time. No. I'm looking forward to it, ha ha ha. Dot. On the other hand, Wang Ling and other coalition soldiers were all smiling. Although the Allied guys didn't give them any more trouble after the successive battles, there was always an indescribable awkwardness in staying at the Allied base. Well now, our base is finally here. Before coming to support, Wang Ling had ordered the tank factory to produce a batch of anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. The actual purpose was to allow soldiers to ride on them during migration, so as to save some marching time. However, after all, an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle can only carry 5 people, and the number of people in the Wolf group and Eagle group is too many. In the end, there are still a group of people on foot, and together with the Apocalypse tanks, it drags down the speed of the entire base. However, fortunately, they have successfully arrived at the Eastern Plains Theater. The large troops marched at a slightly slow speed for a while, and then stopped not far from the Allied base. 2 base vehicles. It was immediately expanded into a coalition base command post. The previous bases in this war zone, whether it was the Allies or the coalition, still had prejudices against each other. Although they were in the same war zone, they were far apart. But General Li Wiki didn't care about this. With Wang Ling's support in advance, these prejudices could be temporarily put aside. After the command post was in place, Wang Ling and Chen Tong also said hello to Agent Tanya, and then led their troops back to their base to reunite with their respective team members and have a good laugh. Then Wang Ling and Chen Tong found General Li Wiki alone and reported on the situation during these days. In fact, General Li Wiki was constantly observing electronic videos during the migration. He already knew the situation in the Eastern Plains war zone, especially what Wang Ling had done. And just as he was praising, King Xiaoping suddenly reported, "General, it seems that our arrival has made Yuri base a little restless." Oh. When General Li Wiki heard this, he looked at the electronic video with Wang Ling and Chen Tong, and found that the Yuri base, which had been quiet for a while, actually sent troops collectively and rushed towards the coalition base. Yes, although there was only one Allied base before, due to the presence of agents Wang Ling and Tanya, the combat effectiveness of both sides was roughly maintained at the same level. Under this situation, Yuri base could still sit still and fight a protracted war and consume war. But now, another base has appeared on the coalition side, and it is also a dual command post. The combat effectiveness is extraordinary at first glance, and the balance has been disrupted. Of course, Yuri base cannot sit still. Now, the coalition base has just arrived, and all aspects have not yet had time to develop. After the Yuri base negotiated with each other, they directly sent troops to take action. Tisk, tisk, this Yuri base is all about eating and not about fighting. However, Wang Ling smiled very playfully at this and volunteered to direct and participate in this blocking battle. When he was at the Allied base before, the number of troops was very limited, but Wang Ling was able to lead his troops to kill all the attacking Yuri troops. Now, although there is no assistance from the Allied forces and the coalition base has not had time to develop, the Wolf Group's large forces have already arrived. With the addition of the infantry, there are also a group of Phantom tanks and Apocalypse tanks. With this lineup, how many groups can be blocked? Yuri's troops are still no problem. After the request for battle was approved, Wang Ling left the command post directly, led the Wolf Group and arranged it skillfully. The main defense force is still armed helicopters, plus Wang Ling, an elite combat soldier. Various infantry and tank teams were arranged in an orderly manner according to the familiar lineups before. After the defense was completed, several batches of laser UFOs from Yuri's troops also arrived at the battle line one after another. The enemies were extremely jealous when they met. After the two sides met, they didn't even say hello and just bombarded them. Dong dong dong. Dong dong dong. Swish swish swish. The laser UFO was also fighting back desperately. While charging forcefully, it dropped laser beams and concentrated fire to bombard the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. However, the batch of anti-aircraft crawlers led by Wang Ling before was enough to deal with the numerous laser UFOs, not to mention the large number of anti-aircraft crawlers brought by the Wolf Group on this trip. Under that set of artillery fire, several batches of laser UFOs behaved like an air force. Failed to break through this layer of defense, and were all shot down. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 702. There were 3 batches of laser UFOs, totaling half a hundred in number. However, they failed to break into the base and were forcibly intercepted and destroyed. This shows the coalition's air defense capabilities. Dozens of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles opened fire at once, and together with the pervert Wang Ling, the momentum was simply frightening. However, in these days of fighting, Wang Ling and the others have experienced too many battles. The current scene does not affect their emotions at all. After killing the laser UFO, they immediately changed their defense formation to prepare for the next one. Bose Yuri Armored Forces. Previously, Yuri's unit's multi-service joint attack once caused Wang Lingdu trouble, repeatedly threatening the safety of the base, and Wang Lingdu had to point it out during the joint meeting. But now, as Wang Ling's arms have been converted into elite combat soldiers and his arms level has been upgraded to 7-star ace, he has been able to gradually suppress the joint attacks of multiple arms. Almost no tanks or vehicles can withstand his attacks. What's more, the coalition lineup now has armed helicopters, an armored unit with ultra-long range. After continuous fighting until now, there are also a lot of elites. The range is even better than that of magneto-electric tanks, coupled with elite-level powerful firepower. And can also forcefully counter-attack the charge of Yuri's troops. These two categories can be said to be the basis for the alliance to fight against the Seoul Empire. However, Wang Ling personally brought a group of elite armed helicopters with superimposed firepower. Even if Yuri's troops jointly attacked with multiple arms, there was nothing they could do against them. For example, in the current situation, several groups of different Yuri armored units were clearly eyeing them, but Wang Ling showed no fear. After the first batch of installed units arrived, he quickly counterattacked according to the style of play he was accustomed to before. At the farthest range, armed helicopters opened fire, and then Wang Ling joined in, and then Sundahu and Erlu, Phantom tanks, Rhino tanks, Apocalypse tanks, and the army of mobilization troops. Under such layers of firepower, several batches of Yuri armored units were completely destroyed. As many Wolf Group troops as they could reach were quickly wiped out. The remaining infantry was even simpler. Several large groups of Yuri infantry were not difficult at all in Wang Ling's opinion. They were handed over to armed helicopters to kill the virus snipers. Wang Ling and several SEALs teamed up to quickly deal with the rest. This battle was a happy one. As the sound of cha-cha-cha-cha shooting continued, a large number of Yuri infantry were killed every moment. After several waves of charges, Wang Ling's SEAL experience went smoothly. He broke through to the 5-star Special Forces level and accumulated an additional batch. Most of the SEALs who fought with them were successfully promoted to 3-star elites. These Yuri troops are simply like treasure delivery boys. Until now, Wang Ling's elite combat soldier level is still just a hair away from the full level 10-star soldier king, and he has not been able to successfully break through. However, the SEALs who had prepared for a rainy day and switched in advance have actually reached the 5-star Special Forces level. This is true. Wang Ling was somewhat dumbfounded. This is the first time that the large force of the Wolf Group has fought since joining the Eastern Plains War Zone. However, it is an elite division after all, and it is led by Wang Ling. Even the Allies are impressed by the strong combat effectiveness they have shown. Shock. Of course, it was not just the allies who were shocked. The opponent Yuri's base was also a little frightened. With the strong combat effectiveness of this team, they could not conquer it even if the allied base was not rebuilt. This discovery made these Yuri bases shocked and angry. However, they had no choice but to use all means to take over this coalition base, or to take over Wang Ling and Wolf's troops. The troops are stationed and expanded to prepare for the upcoming war. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the coalition forces naturally quickly launched into reconstruction operations. After all, Wang Ling's temporary base has unlocked all technologies and does not need to build too many prerequisite buildings in sequence. General Li Wiki can also use this convenience to quickly rebuild ore refineries, tank factories, nuclear reactors, maintenance factories, sentry guns, magnetic storm coils and many other buildings were erected rapidly one after another. Even during the reconstruction process, Agent Tanya ordered engineers to come to the coalition base and build a crack generator next to the command post. Of course, with General Li Wiki managing the reconstruction process, Wang Ling would not have much leisure time. After the inspection and patrol, he directly found a stone and lay down on it with his legs crossed. His free and carefree look made Agent Tanya's face turn a little dark after seeing it in the electronic video. "I asked you why, with your ability, you are still unable to take the position of commander. You are willing to be the leader of the field team. It turns out that this is your idea. The commander is busy directing reconstruction and deployment, and you have nothing to do. Free disorganized. Even though the commander is more powerful than you, he is actually just helping you manage the base in the name of your superior." At this point, Agent Tanya finally understood Wang Ling's thoughts and started to regret, "Why did I take over this damn commander position in the first place? Ordering and deploying all day long is so annoying. Still, this guy is smart." In the eyes of others, the position of commander is high, powerful, and prestigious, but he does not have the qualifications and abilities to do it. However, Wang Ling gave it up voluntarily, and Agent Tanya also regretted taking this position. If this was to be spread, it would not be possible. I don't know how many people have been depressed to the point of vomiting blood. Who allows different grades, different statuses, and different visions? There is only one commander, and in the eyes of the two of them, that's all. Of course, it would not be accurate to say that Wang Ling did nothing, because before returning to the real world at night, Wang Ling temporarily summoned Chen Tong in the transfer station, injected an intermediate enhancer, and converted the magnet explode infantry. Wang Ling had thought about this idea during the previous battle, but due to time constraints, he did not put it into action. Now, the coalition base has arrived and is being rapidly rebuilt. The Yuri base has been beaten to a halt and will not launch an attack for a while. We simply take advantage of this opportunity to satisfy Chen Tong's wish. Although the success rate of this intermediate enhancer is not 100%, the success rate is as high as 80%, so there is no need for Wang Ling to worry about anything. All four of them, Sun Dehua, could succeed, let alone Chen Tong? Ask yourself, if under the same level of strengthening conditions, Wang Ling and Chen Tong were dual, he really would not be absolutely sure that he could suppress Chen Tong. Of course, that is just a hypothesis. After all, even if he is injected with intermediate enhancement, Chen Tong only has one chance to switch arms, and there is no way he can reach Wang Ling's height. There were no accidents in this strengthening process. After a painful struggle, the strengthening was successfully completed, followed by a series of military conversions and the injection of military experience books. After the series of operations, Chen Tong was obviously more cheerful and excited than before. Seeing him like this, Wang Ling also sighed, this strengthening and switching of arms were worth it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 703. Wang Ling, thank you. After some excitement, Chen Tong thanked him sincerely. He was originally an arrogant person who refused to lag behind. Wang Ling was too perverted to be compared to him, but Sun Dehu and Erlu both surpassed him, which really made him dim for a long time. Now, Wang Ling fulfilled his wish and gave him a chance to compete with Sun Dehu and Erlu. Wang Ling smiled, patted him on the shoulder and said, "You're welcome, we are comrades in the same base. When you return to the Red Alert world, you won't have this enhanced memory, but the enhanced effects and the training for changing arms, the memory will be retained. When the time comes, you can just exercise your control and look for opportunities to improve your level." New. Okay, let's go back. Watching Chen Tong walk into the black vortex and return to the Red Alert world, Wang Ling then stretched out, then on second thought, he temporarily summoned all the soldiers who had reached the 3-star elite level in the Wolf group and even the Eagle group. What does he want to do? Naturally, it was a collective injection of basic physical fitness enhancers. After learning about his idea, Uncle Hay was a little stunned. Is your kid addicted to reinforcement? Can you strengthen so many people in one go? After hearing this, Wang Ling was quite dumbfounded. I can't blame you for telling me these rules of the system so late. If you know that people in the Red Alert world can also be injected with enhancers and the upper limit of the military level can be raised, I would have done it one by one. It's been strengthened, do you need to wait until now? Uncle Hay was speechless. For basic enhancement, one reagent only costs 100 points. You can get these points by killing an enemy infantry in the Red Alert world. It is very simple and easy to obtain, and the 100% success rate is enough for Wang Ling to redeem it with peace of mind. Use. Uncle Hay said at the beginning that this is the most cost-effective type of exchange system. Wang Ling had just come into contact with the different dimensional system and did not understand it very well. It was not until now that he understood this truth. This series of battles in the Red Alert world also allowed him to obtain hundreds of thousands of points, which was enough to strengthen all the soldiers under his command. Moreover, he also had a large number of points. Depending on his mood, he could even give Hu Ben and the others some points. Also strengthen it at the intermediate level. After the basic strengthening, not only the overall physical quality has made a qualitative leap, but more importantly, the upper limit of the corresponding military level can also be raised to the 5-star Special Forces level. Although the 3-star elite level is already very powerful, there is still a gap compared to the 5-star Special Forces. Many of Wang Ling's veteran elites have been promoted to the 3-star level for a long time, and all the extra experience has been wasted. It is better to increase the level cap. Over time, most of the Wolf group will be promoted to the 5-star Special Forces level, and they will be the Ace Division created by Wang Ling himself. Not only will their combat effectiveness be extremely powerful, but their chances of survival will also be greatly improved. Taken together, these 100 points are well spent. Dozens of nearly 100 basic strengthening agents were exchanged successfully, and Wang Ling distributed them one by one. Many elite soldiers were injected together. After some pain, the strengthening was successfully completed. After the goal was achieved, Wang Ling sent them directly back to the Red Alert world without leaving them any longer, while he himself returned to the real world to continue resting for the day. During this day's rest, Wang Ling recalled the strengthening of those soldiers, but he had an idea, and he quickly asked in his mind, "Yes, Uncle Hay, a question suddenly occurred to me. In the Red Alert world, after the virtual life materializes, if you can inject the enhancer, then after bringing the enhancer to the real world, can people in the real world also be able to inject it?" Okay, after Uncle Hay answered, he solemnly reminded, "However, you must find an absolutely justified reason for the source of the strengthening agent, or you must set up a top-secret organization yourself, and you can absolutely control the recruitment. It requires qualified personnel to inject it, otherwise the existence of the extra-dimensional system may be exposed. After Wang Ling heard this, he immediately ran out of ideas. This extra-dimensional system is his biggest secret. No one in the real world can tell anyone about it, otherwise there will be endless trouble. Although this enhancer can strengthen people in the real world, where can Wang Ling compile the source of this enhancer? There are loopholes in any lie, let alone something like an enhancer that goes far beyond modern science. They will definitely be forced to ask questions, and may even be exposed on a large scale. By then, the existence of different dimensional systems may be exposed. The consequences were so serious that even Wang Ling couldn't bear it, so he simply cut off the idea from the source and let the other dimensional system and the real world be separated from each other. It would be best not to have any intersection. As for the establishment of a top-secret organization, this proposal was immediately thrown out of Wang Ling's mind. He had no interest in such a thing. After a day's rest, Wang Ling returned to the Red Alert world and continued his day's life. In the world of Red Alert that day, there was no overall change. It was just that the bases were working hard to build troops and prepare for the subsequent war. However, small-scale excitement in the coalition base is inevitable. Chen Tong also made the same problem as Wang Ling, Sun Dehua, and others. He couldn't control the power of the guarantee for a while and destroyed a lot of things. However, even so, Chen Tong was not sad but happy. Although he could not retain the enhanced memory, the effect was real. After nearly a day of training, Chen Tong gradually mastered the power of this body. Although he is arrogant, he is not going to go around looking for someone to challenge him. After all, as the leader of the team, his status is too high, and he still can't lose his face. However, Sun Dehu and Erlu came to challenge him shamelessly. Even though Chen Tong has just been strengthened at the intermediate level and has a slight lack of experience in the military, this person is very familiar with Zhengzhenkan, flexible and changeable, and has extremely strong fighting ability, and can even vaguely suppress the original stumbling block. On the other hand, Sun Dehua and Erlu were not that strong in boxing and kicking skills, and were not even as good as those two roadblocks. The result of this challenge can be imagined, and they failed miserably. However, after the defeat, the two of them were unwilling to accept it and invited Wang Ling out. Although they are also intermediate level enhancements, and Chen Tong is more familiar with Zhengzhenkan than Wang Ling has had many more military experience enhancements than Chen Tong. This is where his physical fitness lies. This battle will not be easy. Unexpectedly, the loser was Chen Tong again, regaining the game for Sun Dehu and Erlu. However, Chen Tong had no objection to this. Wang Ling's perversion was obvious to all. Even as arrogant as Chen Tong, he had long given up the idea of competing with Wang Ling. Buzz. 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 After the duel, while everyone was laughing and judging, several consecutive alarms suddenly sounded from the electronic map in Wang Ling's subconscious. This kind of alarm was very different from the alarm when the base was attacked. Wang Ling didn't quite understand what was going on for a while. He quickly checked it and found that in the corner of the electronic map, he saw the Allied super weapon Lightning Storm. Countdown. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 704. In Red Alert, there are two types of Allied super weapons, one responsible for auxiliary weapons and the other responsible for indiscriminate large-scale destruction. And this lightning storm is exactly the kind of super weapon destroyed by the Allied forces. Since it was approved, the corresponding generating device has finally been built. But what surprised Wang Ling was that the Allies moved so quickly this time and built the super weapon before the Allied forces. It seemed that their highest authority had far more concerns about the super weapons of the Seoul Empire than the Allied forces. Out of curiosity, Wang Ling hurriedly switched war zones from the electronic map to see what the Apocalypse control machine looked like. However, all war zones have checked, but no sign of the weather control machine was found anywhere. In fact, super weapons such as the Apocalypse control machine are actually built at the Allied forces headquarters. Regardless of the fact that the two armies are united and electronic maps are shared, what is shared is only the electronic maps of each war zone. The headquarters maps of the two parties will not be shared. This is the bottom line for both parties, and no one has a choice. Wang Ling couldn't help but feel a little regretful that he couldn't check the location of the weather control machine. However, fortunately, he has seen it more than once in the game, and it is also the same in the Red Alert world. After all, the world of Red Alert is somewhat different from the game. The Empire of Mind used super weapons prematurely. But in fact, with the completion of the Allied weather control machine, the whole world officially entered the era of super weapons. The rules of super weapon mode also began to appear. Not only the countdown of the Allied super weapons was marked on the electronic map, but also the countdown of the super weapons of the Soul Empire was also marked. But after seeing this countdown, Wang Ling was shocked. Because the electronic map shows that there is only a little more than 1 day left in the countdown to the gene mutation of the Mind Empire, and there are less than 3 days left in the Psychic Storm. On the other hand, the Allied Lightning Storm still has more than a week. Darling, Wang Ling has seen the power of this Psychic Empire super weapon more than once or twice. It would be a catastrophe for the Allied and Coalition bases in the Red Alert world. And this kind of disaster was actually prepared in a day or two, depending on Yuri's mood. After seeing this situation, Wang Ling inevitably felt a little wary. This is different from the previous situation. Although there were super weapons in the Soul Empire before, Wang Ling even suggested to be on guard. However, because he could not see the specific time of the countdown, although he was on alert at any time, it would inevitably become less effective as time went by. A little wary. But things are different now. Seeing the countdown time clearly, Wang Ling, no matter how aggressive he is, has to be vigilant. Wang Ling dare not do anything until the genetic mutation and psychic storm are ready and released. Let alone taking the initiative to attack. Even if you stay in the base, you have to be cautious. This is the huge influence of super weapons on war. Of course, Wang Ling was not the only one who could see this countdown. Other officers and soldiers who had the authority to view it also discovered this countdown immediately, and they all changed their minds for a while. Even General Li Wiki hurriedly sent Wang Ling and Chen Tong to the police. He, Sun Dehu and others all called to the command post to discuss countermeasures. General, as I said in the joint meeting, we must beware of the Psycho Empire super weapons. On the one hand, our troops must reduce the density to avoid being overwhelmed by the super weapons. On the other hand, we must also rely on things like crack generators. Artificially creating unexplored areas and covering the entire base made the Empire of the Mind confused about the situation, hesitant and unable to release super weapons. Previously, the Allies had created crack generators everywhere to create suspicion formations. This was done very well, indeed. It can effectively contain the super weapon of the Mind Empire. After meeting with General Li Wiki, Wang Ling expressed his opinion. General Li Wiki nodded, stared at the beating countdown on the electronic map, frowned and asked, "Then which battlefield do you think will be the winner for the super weapon?" Wang Ling shook his head. He was not Yuri, and he had no idea where this guy would release his super weapon. And Sun Dehu said worriedly, "I think they should target us." General, you also know how perverted the team leader is. Originally, the Eastern Plains war zone was about to be lost, but because the team leader brought us to the rescue, he suddenly used the powerful firepower, suppressed it, and even destroyed several Yuri bases, disrupting the rhythm of the Soul Empire. His Soul Empire has no reason not to hate us. I'm afraid he has already targeted us. This time the super weapon, we are probably the most dangerous. Even Chen Tong nodded and said, "Yes, especially Wang Ling. If I were Yuri, I would definitely try my best to get rid of him." the superweapon will most likely be dropped on us. Niuhuang argued, that's not necessarily the case. We have already had 2 bases here to compete with Yuri's base again. The Empire of Mind may also change its target, attack other war zones, and drop super weapons on other war zones. Pick up the persimmon soft pinch. Several people were telling each other their own thoughts. Most of them felt a little insecure, but some people believed that they would not win the prize. They argued and couldn't agree on one thing. After listening to what they said, Li Wiki, who had been silent for a while, said, "What you said all makes sense. Super weapons can fall anywhere, but the possibility here is the greatest, so we have to be more cautious." That's right, based on the existing foundation, we need to disperse the troops even more and create more crack generators. It's okay to disperse the troops, but the crack generators belong to the Allies. Are they willing to make so many for us? Don't forget that we have helped them a lot, and if we die, there will be no benefit to them at this stage. Next, a group of people discussed in detail how to defend against the super weapon that was very likely to arrive, and finally decided on several general plans, which were handed over to General Li Wiki and Agent Tanya for detailed negotiation and implementation. Wang Ling couldn't get involved in the rest of the matter, and left the command post after the temporary meeting. He was fine, but General Li Wiki and Agent Tanya were busy. After consulting with each other for a long time, they finally settled on the safest plan. In the past 2 days, the Allied forces stepped up their efforts to build crack generators. Not only did 4 or 5 of them stand around the Allied forces, but several were also built around the coalition bases. The location of these crack generators is quite particular. The unexplored areas are connected to each other. After they are completed, the Allied and coalition forces quietly moved their command posts directly in this dark area and evened out their troops. Spread out and be careful.